I am incredibly excited and very, very honored to have Bob Carter with us this morning. Bob Carter is one of the world's leading experts in the areas of institutional strategy and philanthropy. For over 4 decades, he's worked with organizations worldwide to help them overcome their challenges and capitalize on their opportunities, redefine their fundraising programs. And we know that all of us in the nonprofit business, nothing is more important than our fundraising efforts. Bob, it was at Ketchum, one of the world's largest consulting companies for many years as president and CEO, went out on his own in 2011, has this great business, Carter Global. Bob has got a lot of great accolades and things he's been involved in. Just to hit a few, he's a founding board member of the World Health Organization in Geneva, Switzerland, past chair of Association of Fundraising Professionals, and many, many other organizations. This year, he received AFP's International Chairs Award for lifetime service. So congratulations, Bob. That's quite an accomplishment.
Thank you.
He is a proud graduate of Johns Hopkins. He lives with his wife, Carol, in Florida. We were just talking about how we keep an eye on hurricanes in the Gulf and hope we're done for the year. But we are really excited to have Bob join us today about an important topic that we know we're all struggling with. What in the world is going on out there and what can one do about it? Take it away, Bob. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jill. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to talk and also to answer some of your questions. As I said in the little video I did in advance, I hope that you don't leave without your questions answered. And even after the fact, I'm happy to respond to some questions you might have. So I have some information. What I'd like to do is give you some information based on my experience, and then hear from you. So we'll have a little bit of a dialogue, and I think Jill is going to help me with that. So with that, I'd like to get our first slide. I am going to use some PowerPoint to guide the conversation today. And I did open up with what in the world is going on out there, and just to give you an idea of the kind of world that we're living in. I think this will give you a sense of it. You can add other things if you want, but we've had this global pandemic, and that's kind of an interesting spot to be in. We have, as a result of that, we have a kind of recession, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as we go forward. We have an election coming up. You're in the USA, you know that always brings some kind of trauma to donors, to our culture, if you will, and this is a humdinger for all of that. We've had a lockdown. If you live around the coast or live in Louisiana or Florida, we had hurricanes, and more named hurricanes, I think, this year than ever, which gives another layer of anxiety. My wife and I were talking about, good heavens, here we have pandemic, we've had lockdown, and by the way, it's hurricane season on top of it. And poor Lake Charles got hit twice in a row. We do have this other thing, Cold Wars going on with China and with North Korea and Russia, and all these things stirring up in our minds. It's a lot of overload out there. And having said all that, I want to add on the other side of the ledger the fact that we've got, more wealth being created in the world today than's ever been created in the last 3 to 5 years. And wealth creation, as you know, is what drives general philanthropy, if you will. And I'll talk about other drivers in a couple minutes too. More women are giving away higher gifts, making higher gifts out of their own resources than ever before. And wealth is being created by women, for women, and in many, many other areas as well. And their generosity is proven. Generosity in general is growing. And not only in the US, but globally, this is a factor. And by the way, just to clarify, I was not a founder of the World Health Organization, but I was a founder of the World Health Organization Foundation, which is a new entity to raise money from high net worth individuals, which they've never been able to do before, basically. And so that was quite an honor. I was an advisor to the creation of it, and then they asked me to be a founding foundation board member, which I accepted with delight. So I think, in looking at what's going on out there, we like to look at both sides of the equation, good things, bad things, and where do we find ourselves as fundraisers. So on the next slide, I'd like to talk a little bit about putting things in historical perspective. And I hope you all can read this better than I can, because this screen is reducing this presentation down pretty much. Um, but this is about the sixth recession I've been a part of, and there are very few things that give you advantage as you get older. But I've been through this before. Um, I will say that looking at this, I was very happy. I had a 12% mortgage back in the 80s, and I was happy to have it. Unheard of today. Interest rates were through the ceiling. Inflation was a problem. All of that. Uh, we had a recession around that, and uh, raising money all through it. The 9/11 trauma to the country caused a financial recession. It was effectively the result was. Um, and that was a great moment in time as well, because the country came together in a way I haven't seen it come together since, as Americans. I was honored to be a part of raising the money to build the Flight 93 Memorial in Pennsylvania. That was a real sort of almost climax to my career, to be able to help our country honor those people who fought back. The Great Recession of 2008 and 9, I think most of you remember that, if you've been in the business for a few years. Uh, and that was very interesting, because that was a financial driven recession. The banks were failing, the insurance companies were failing, all the financial institutions in the US and globally were beginning to fail. When the US finances fail, the world fails. That's the way it's been. China fails, we fail, the rest of the world is in trouble. So that was differentiated between the recession that we've had as part of the pandemic was government driven recession. That is where, for health reasons and the good of all, the government told everybody to go home and shut your businesses, stop working, and actually brought business to almost a halt in this country. And that's the first government driven recession I've been a part of. The key difference is the financial institutions are still strong, which is why you see the markets remaining strong. The Dow Jones average in 2009 March was around 6,500, and it's soared up in the next 10 years to get it up to, in this past February, was at 29,000. Uh, Big jump, big difference. All that growth is sitting in portfolios of people who've been investing for at least 10 years. That's still phenomenal growth, and it's still there. The market is hovering around 28,000, et cetera, a far cry from 6,500. And we were still raising money in 6,500. I mentioned the Dow because the things that drive philanthropy are actually the equities market. It's a psychological as well as a reality measure. And then we have the employment statistics. The employment statistics drive the lower middle and bottom of the donor pool, and the equities market drives the top, middle, and the top. And mega and major gifts are generally made through appreciated securities in this country. And so that's why we say these things help drive philanthropy. So we're in pretty good shape on the major and megas. The middle and bottom is still suffering. The lower gifts are suffering a bit, only because we got to get employment back to reasonable levels on a state by state basis. And the other thing that's going to accelerate is when we get some vaccine that is safe and deliverable in this country. I think we're going to see the economic indicators are we're going to have a hockey stick type of rebound here that's going to fuel this market to even higher levels. Now, we can talk forever about what the election might mean for that, and that's a subject of another seminar. On the next slide, I'd like to boil it down to what really happens in philanthropy, and that has all to do with human behavior. The other metrics are very interesting and nice, but human behavior really drives us in terms of whether we give or we don't give, and to what we might give. And our culture in the United States is surrounded by what I say positive human behavior related to philanthropy. You'll see there I say the need to help. I happen to personally think that is that little bit inside of every human being that drives them to say, my neighbor needs something, I need to help them. That's the person who walked into this town square and looked around and said, somebody should do something about this. And then they realized that someone was them, and they did it. So I think that's a little God-given thing that's inside of all of us, and I think it's important that we understand that. The other human behavior and reaction to, particularly to trauma, is fear, and we have to understand fear to be good fundraisers. And in the pandemic, excuse me, in the economic recessions, fear takes over, and that's what drives our decisions. And most of you know and understand that fear-driven decisions are not terribly strategic. They're usually in the hunker down mode, et cetera. And if you do hunker down as an institution, what generally happens is you fall behind. And back to the markets, everybody doesn't go broke in a recession. Certain parts of the market suffer, other parts of the market do fine, and they're growing and thriving through and throughout recession. So we one of the dangers we have as fundraisers is making decisions for donors and potential donors. Well, they must be hurting, so we don't want to ask them. The truth is, we encourage you to ask them. The mission of your agency and organization is no less important than it was 6 months ago. It's still vital, it's still important, and we need to be asking in a compassionate way. Our narrative shifts around. We begin to ask questions when we talk to people like, how are you? I hope you're doing okay. How can we help you? Those kinds of conversations as part of the invitation for them to give. So I think that's an important understanding that there's still people of significant potential who can make gifts, and that's why the gift pyramid, if you will, that looks a little bit like this in normal times, begins to scrunch in at the bottom and grow higher at the top, because top donors have a tendency to step up in time of crisis. Again, that's part of the human response to these kinds of things, and it's moving from fear to hope. And by the way, you're the organizations who represent that hope. And that last bullet on there, I think, is really important. The important thing is to be taking action. Sometimes whether it's right or wrong, you just have to begin doing things. And I always tell our partners at Carter, you have about a half an hour to be afraid, and then you have to start figuring out where you're going to go and what you're going to do, and be preparing for something that we call recovery. In all of those circumstances that I've talked about recessions, we had the dot-com bubble burst, we had 9/11. There's always been a recovery, and our business lives in the recovery part of that as optimistic fundraisers. So on the next slide, I pretty much covered it, so I'm gonna move quickly over that, and I reconfirm a little bit about what drives giving. But I think I just like to point out I did an ad campaign years ago for Ketchum, and it was called "No Cynic Ever Built a Cathedral," and I believe that. Over a period of years and generations, sometimes the great cathedrals of the world were built, and you had to be optimistic that you were building something great. And part of the role as fundraisers is to be that optimist, to be that person who looks around and says, we can do this, we can overcome this adversarial position. And that's why I always say, no cynic ever built a cathedral. The next slide actually is the one that I was referring to, with the major and mega giving coming largely from the equities market, and then employment driving the middle and acquisition level or lower ends of giving. So that's an important statistic to understand. It's an important concept to understand as you go about your strategies during difficult times. Let's talk about leadership for a couple of minutes, and that is, okay, what can you do? And that's part of the title that I give you. Leadership becomes critical, and I often say, and I've said this in actual meetings, I've chaired 7 nonprofit boards and gone through some difficult times, gone through CEO, uh, I will say, retirements and eliminations and all of that. But these are the moments that great leaders live for. This is why you're a leader. This is why you're sitting around the table. And as fundraisers, we end up having to take leadership positions all the time to lead our teams and help lead our organizations through difficult times. So I say there's nothing better than a calm, steady hand at the wheel. An old sailor, which I am, kind of analogy there. Steady hand at the wheel. And you know that when you run into a storm in a boat, you can't run away from it most of the time. So you have to go with it. And sometimes you have to go into the wave, not away from the wave, and ride it over and ride the crest. If you put your anchor down and say, we're going to hunker down, your boat will sink in a storm. You have to free ride the wave. So you depend on your sails and you depend on your strategies for navigation and your attentiveness during a storm. And that's what you have to do all the while remaining calm, and your others around you will remain calm as long as you do. Let them know that you're nimble, you're optimistic, you're ready to pivot. I think that's one of the more important concepts that we have out here. We need to change things. Most changes, most great changes in this world have come as a result of trauma, because the window was open for us to stop doing business the way we used to, which we may not be able to go back to, and do different things. I have lots of examples of our partners changing the way they deliver programs, changing the way they do fundraising galas, changing the way they do things, and they're not going to go back to the old way in some cases. In other cases, we just can't wait to get back there, but in others, we will. One of the important concepts of us during these times is to be completely transparent about our difficulties and our opportunities and where we're headed with our organizations, and that's so important to understand. Next slide is one that I like very much, and it's affirming beliefs. And this is a time when we actually do that. We want to affirm the belief and plant it rather out there that we're going to be around when this is over. We're going to be here. It's a little bit like the resilience of recovery after a hurricane. We're going to rebuild. This is who we are. This is what we do, and assuring others that they can do likewise. So I think that assurance is really important to donors. Mission is powerful. We believe that, and important. It's important enough to continue to support it in difficult times and in good times. We have to believe that our teams are strong, whether it's program team or philanthropy team, fundraising teams. Our administration, our management is strong, and we have to trust them. This is a moment when your trust will be tested with the folks who work for you, but you have to come to the conclusion that they're trustworthy and let them carry out their roles at a time when you may not have the time to devote so much attention to them. And overall, it's we can do this. We can do this. We'll ride this through. We'll get through this. We're going to have to change some of our strategic thinking, but we'll get there. And I think that's an important concept of affirmation. So I said you get a half an hour to not to worry about it. And then the next slide shows a couple things about taking action. And one of the first things that we like to do all the time, particularly in difficult times, is have an organization do what we call an asset review. And that is, what are the assets that our organization really has in both personnel, program, philanthropy, volunteers? What are the assets? We like to call them also accelerators. What are the parts of this agency that can accelerate us to success in both good times and particularly in bad times, in difficult times when we're strained and stressed? So we start with looking at programs. So, during difficult times, you sell your powerful programs. You go to your strength because that's where your brand is probably best known, and you begin to over communicate on your strength, market deeply on your strength, and go forward in that manner. Who are our best people? Who are our strongest advocates, if you will? Who are the people, the accelerators inside, who can articulate who we are, who can articulate those strengths the best, and our most loyal, and who are our best trustees, who are our best board members, our volunteers who will help us out, are likely to help us out during this time. And during these times, we say over communicate. You need to be talking to people. We encouraged all the CEOs of the Carter Partners, all of those nonprofit CEOs, to get on the telephone or get on Zoom or get on Skype or something, have a conversation with your top 20 or 30 donors over a period of a few weeks and let them know where you are. And also ask, how are you? And what can we do to help you? Lots and lots of good things come from being transparent and having that conversation uh, in a time when they're under stress, in a time when you're under stress, and you're talking about something positive for the future. And you assure them that we're going to be there and the values that you've been investing in will still be here and still be important. Uh, so I think the pivot for program delivery is, again, can we do business differently under these circumstances? And all of this is top-down communications, starting with the board, starting with the CEO, and looking at who can communicate best on our behalf. The next slide is a slide that from which you get a lot of your optimism, I think, and that is we're always planning for recovery. We're always preparing for recovery. We know that we're going to get through this. We're already getting through it in some ways. We've had a second wave in some places, but more people are working now than were working 3 months ago. As I said, the financial institutions are still strong. There's money to be invested in the markets, and employment will climb its way and claw its way back. So I think we're in the recovery mode post-election, post-vaccine, and we're going to see some acceleration now. So all the actions that you take during a difficult time are based on recovery. And be optimistic and confident, and don't be surprised if a recovery is faster than you thought or even slower than you thought. But always remember that a recovery is out there. The world is not ending. Everybody didn't go broke. Financial institutions are strong. Your case is still strong and needs support, and the people will be there to help you. Prepare and release your assets. Remember, I talked about what are your assets. I'll talk a little more about that and how you might do that on the next slide and getting ready for the kind of release that might be really helpful. So we're out of the preparation. So who can do what? So after we get that review, then we begin to assign the tasks to people and look for the voices. Who are the best voices you can have out there? And I think this is one of the more interesting things where volunteer voices become even more important during difficult times. So the voices of your board members, having a board member call up a top 30 donor and say, we want to, first of all, thank you for what you've been doing for us, but now what can we do for you? How are you doing? How are you faring through this difficult time? I can tell you that the people who receive those phone calls will never forget it. And in that phone call, you also say, we're having a difficult time too, but we're getting through it, and we hope you will continue to support us in the best way that you possibly can. So that kind of I would say, congenial and optimistic dialogue is one of the best tools you can have. And that's one of the best ways that some of your board members can be activated and made to feel like they're actually helping you get through this particular period. So the messaging and communicating needs to shift around a little bit. You're more sensitive to the needs out there. You're sensitive to the economic difficulties that they might be having. And you work towards, again, helping everybody work towards recovery. And you prioritize your programs. Who are our top 3 programs? And you begin investing as much time and effort in making sure that they're sound. And because if you do that, the rest of the programs generally follow with funding help, etc. The next slide is specifically more about the boards, which thematically was one of the things we wanted to talk about. And if you'll notice, all of these actions can be done in a cyber world, because that's the world we're living in right now. I've had two what I'll call face-to-face socially distanced meetings since March because people haven't been comfortable having those kinds of meetings. Excuse me, and they can work, and I think there are more of them coming. But we have to be effective in the cyber world that we're in. These are some of the heads up. By the way, those board members, you can script them. You can let them know what the priorities are, but give them the podium. Don't be afraid to do this. This is another opportunity where we say, trust your constituency, trust those who are around you. Um, the PSAs are another way you can do this electronically. My wife and I did some videos in our backyard for something that we very much believe in here on the island where we live. And we just simply pointed out some of the, we actually put a financial challenge up, and we said we would match certain level gifts up to a limit. And we did it in the backyard. It had to do with the environment. So we have artificial reefs in the water behind the house. And we talked about that. And it was about a 26-second, I think, or something video, very effective. Brought out two more matching families, and all of our matches were met within, I think, 7 or 9 days, something like that, and really did a big boost for the agency we were working with. Kind of public service announcements like that. The amateur announcements are very well received. Homemade videos are going very well, put online, and they've been very effective during this time when everybody is online. The givers. What about the givers during this time? Well, a lot of the givers are doubling down. You know what happens in recessions and difficult times is the donor who was supporting 10 agencies supports 3 to 5 now. They've made their priority picks because they say, I can't support everything, but I want to make sure these 5 are there when this is over. The best time to make sure you're in the top 5 list is when times are good, because you stored those people in a way that you've made them make your agency one of their top 5 in the way that you've treated them based on their giving, the way you've stewarded them and their gifts. And I always say, let the $5,000 donor know that you think it's a $5 million gift. And it's remarkable how you can grow that gift over time. That's the way some of the biggest gifts in this country got grown. And I have lots of specific examples about that. So double down, matching challenges. I mentioned how you can use them. Operating funds can be raised. This is not strictly for capital things, but you need operating funds during this time. Great time to raise your operating funds and to bring on friends. It's a great time in those conversations to ask a friend to call a friend and spread your circles out just like you would in some other times and some other places. So just to give you a couple examples of that quickly here, and then I'm going to open for some questions. But we had a client out in Vail, Colorado, where they have a very special camp. It's one of the Paul Newman camps for special kids, and a very successful operation. But how do you have camps when you can't invite kids to the camp? So they immediately pivoted, and they're one of the ones that worried for about a 45-minute span, and then said, we're going to do cyber camping. So they redefined their curriculum. They redid everything. They did the technology. They tested the best technologies for this, and they have been doing cyber camping since April. What they discovered in this cyber camping was that they could actually have kids who were in the hospitals who could never come to their camp in person anyhow, be campers. So it's actually been an expansion of their camping reach, forced by COVID and by the circumstances. The second story about that place is about a month into we had just started a campaign, but about a month into the capital campaign, two trustees walked in and they made significant gifts, one of 500,000, one of $1.2 million. And they told the CEO, look, thanks for the phone call. We know these are hard times. Here are 2 gifts, and tell everybody else that we're still working with you. We're going to be there, and this is to assure everyone that we're here. That was a great step, and they said use our gifts as leverage with others. great step in the way, and came about really as a result of, the communication and transparency that organization's CEO was having. There was another story like that in Baltimore it's called Helping Up Mission, a very successful Christian agency in the city of Baltimore, providing recovery services for alcohol and drug. And they have a facility that keeps up to 500 men for up to 6 months with training, et cetera. We're now in a campaign to change that, to add to that 300 women and children who will be able to stay in the facility for up to 6 months and get the same kind of recovery and same kind of trainings, et cetera. It's a great program. The CEO called their biggest donor during the first weeks of the pandemic, assured them that they were working hard, they were trying to get things on track, and said, we're going to have to lay a couple people off, but I think we'll be okay. Had the conversation, hung the phone up. About 40 minutes later, the phone rings. It's that donor, largest donor with the foundation, saying, something you said really is bothering us, and that's you might have to lay people off. Said, before you do that, call us, because we've got your back. We don't want you to cut programs because you're going to need the recovery services even more during this period than you needed them before. So they were there to say, we've got your back. That phone call occurred because the first phone call was made to reach out and have the conversation about where they were. So I think these are just examples of the kinds of things that can happen during COVID if you take action, can happen during any recession, any difficult time that our agencies are facing, and that we as Americans are facing in these times where we face things together. But your differentiator for your organization may be in how you look at it, the action that you take, and always be preparing for recovery. Always trying to figure out, okay, where are we really headed now? Is it in this direction, that direction, and prepare for that. And I yet like to use the ice hockey analogy. Wayne Gretzky, the great Canadian who played American ice hockey, and he actually credited all of his success to always skating to where the puck, he thought the puck was going, not to where the puck was. So we always have to be moving to where we think the economy's going, where the people are going, where our donors are going, where our agency may be headed in the future, and always be looking ahead. Be transparent in your conversations. Use all of your assets, including your boards, as well as your program people, and be leaders. And these are the moments that good leaders live for, and be the best leader you can be within your organization. So with that, Jill, I'm going to say thank you for inviting me to this, and I'm happy to answer any questions if any seem to be appearing to you, or
Yeah.
if
Bob, thank you so much. We've got some questions. One of the things people are asking, you talked
yeah,
about women, growing women as philanthropists. What
yeah.
other kind of trends are you seeing from funders, or what do you think? You talked a little bit about this, but as we get into 2021, where do you think some of the newer trends might be, that people need to be
Yeah.
jumping ahead of the curve?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's if I had that crystal ball here, I'd tell you right away what it was. But I think the important thing is to recognize that, and depending on, and here I'll go back to the elections, by the way, don't usually mean a whole heck of a lot for a period of time. But what we have to look at is that we still have public policy that helps create wealth, that will allow people to create wealth, because all philanthropy, big philanthropy, is driven by the ability of people to have disposable funds, and significant disposable funds to help create some of the programs that we do, and having the choice to make among many agencies. I think one of the things that's happening is that we're looking at more and more people being aware of philanthropy. I think the middle and lower ends of philanthropy can grow during this period. There's been a significant growth in giving circles of groups of people who are grouping together. My wife has started one a couple years ago here. The community foundations are hosting a lot of these giving circles, and we're seeing more people participate in those things at levels that we didn't see a couple years ago. I think that's an encouragement. I think we have generations coming up who will want to do philanthropy, but don't know how necessarily to do philanthropy. So our educating of people is going to become even more important. And getting philanthropy in the headlines, I think, is a good thing and not a bad thing. And letting people know how our institutions got built. Uh, a lot of people will look at an institution and say, "Well, how did that happen?" Or they just assumed that it was always there. But a group of community leaders actually got together, maybe some of their relatives, 2 to 3 generations ago, got together and said, "We need a YMCA. We need a Boys and Girls Clubs. We need this." All of those things are community generated. And to help develop a sense that people understand and know that. Um, back specifically to the question, I think that a recognition is going to be that you're competing more and more with global charities. Um, I've been working in and out of the U.S. for over 30 years, working for global charities like World Vision, Children International, CARE, you name it. There are lots and lots of them. And so for many people, uh, that's an exciting thing for them to help the third world countries, to help feed and clothe families and children, and to change the world into a place that is more that actually is more receptive to having a joyful life and more conducive to that than the whole world that we have. Um, and just as an example of that, my wife and I are involved in bringing clean water to the villages in Honduras through World Vision through their WASH program. Part of that is so Hondurans don't necessarily have to escape, so that they can have life there, and and have a way to raise a family in safety and grow their children who don't have hepatitis at birth, all those kinds of things because of dirty water. Um, but the world is now the place where anyone can give. This is your donors in Louisiana are being solicited every day by global charities in a very sophisticated way. So just you have to up your game and understand that.
Yeah. Bob, we have another question. Stuart Thompson says, I was just about to ask about giving circles. Do you perceive there are some especially good avenues for promoting those to become increasingly part of the culture? For my part, I'm intrigued by how giving circles help the overall sector to reach deeper into the lower and middle that you've referenced.
Yeah, Stuart, you're absolutely right. This is uh, it's very interesting to see the phenomenon of that because you have giving circles at $100, you have giving circles at five, you have giving circles at 1,000, and you have giving circles beyond that. So it's really, and I've always had the philosophy that anybody who is given the opportunity to make a gift and does, it's all good. It's all for the good. Giving is a habit. Giving transforms the donor. Uh, and in many cases, the biggest transformation is the donor, not the recipient of what's going on. It works on both sides of the equation. So I'm all about the giving circles. I also am all about the fact that some people who are participating in giving circles can certainly do more. And they should have the opportunity to do that as they fall in love with a particular agency that their circle loves. And I've seen this here in our region because nicely, the Community Foundation hosts a lot of these meetings, and they will bring in the charities to talk to the Giving Circle people and kind of make their pitch. And then, some of the individuals will give even more individually to that particular charity. So it kind of works out to the benefit of everybody when that happens. I'm a big advocate of giving circles because that in some ways is the only opportunity that some people became aware of philanthropy. So I think you talk about increasingly part of culture. I think that's exactly where it is, and I think it's great. The other thing to look at is donor advised funds and what that's doing to us, and there are good and bad sides of that. So I've worked
Yeah.
on all. Yeah.
Bob, one more question before we wrap up. I think we could keep on
Okay.
going on lots of these topics, but one of the things that comes up over and over, I know a lot of us are hearing from our funders these days, is they're looking for collaboration. They're saying we want
Yeah.
more collaboration, and sometimes that's tricky. Sometimes it's easier to facilitate. Sometimes it's scary for organizations. What do you have? What are your initial, just quick thoughts on if a funder is saying, hey, you need to collaborate with XYZ, and maybe that really isn't a fit? How do you address that but keep everybody happy?
Yeah. Well, that last comment throws everything out, keeping everybody
Keep
happy, but
everybody happy.
you
Okay.
never will.
Wishful thinking.
I've been the instigator of attempted collaborations and successful over the years. I'm a big fan of collaboration because I we talk as to so many donors, uh, and when I talk about mega donors and major donors in particular, I go through a whole agenda of what they're looking for. What does the mega donor expect, et cetera? And one of the keys is they expect collaboration and not competition because they want strength to strength to come together. And I'll say this, particularly entrepreneurs, because they have probably started their business by collaborating with some other people to get it off the ground. And they're actually through ecosystems and other ways, they're probably still collaborating with some of those others. So they see the power and strength of 2 to 3 is better than one. Now, is it the right collaboration? Is it something that brings strength to you in an area where maybe you're stronger in other areas and they, join together? I once had, I won't name the agencies, but I had 2 agencies that were trying to campaign at the same time to provide housing, low income housing, 2 different agencies. And they were both clients of mine. So I said, look, I got the CEOs together and we talked about collaboration to have one campaign in a small community for housing, for public housing, for low income housing. And the CEOs loved it. We got their senior staffs together. They loved it. The next move was the executive committees of the boards. We got them in a room with the CEOs and it blew up because the egos of the board members wouldn't let it happen. They started talking about losing identity, and what they were talking about was I might not be on the board that helps this, or they were too competitive in that environment, not recognizing that together they could have raised more money than any one individually could have. So those things usually blow apart at the top. I advise somebody who gets asked to do that to at least explore it if you haven't already. I think we can be a catalyst for really good collaborations. Uh, a lot of food banks. This is how the Meals on Wheels got started. With instead of having every church do their food bank thing, now we churches collect the food and it goes to Central, so they can distribute it through a real food bank, uh, Feeding America, et cetera. And the efficiencies of delivery of services is so much better through that collaboration. But that was initially a collaboration of hundreds and hundreds and thousands of little food banks that were trying to do their thing. Um, Anyhow, that's my answer to that. Try to
Thank
collaborate,
you.
do it if you can.
Thank you, Bob. Bob, thank you so much for making time for us this morning at our first virtual conference. We hope to see you in person, hopefully in 2021. Maybe we can get you to Baton Rouge, but we appreciate it so much.
Love
Thank
it.
you. This was great information.